This video will feature spoilers for Boktai 1, 2, and 3. If anyone thinks that sounds crazy going to Lunar Knights having spoilers for previous games, it'll make more sense when I get to the story section. So you have been warned to feature spoilers for Boktais 1, 2, and 3. I do a video on the channel about Boktais 1, 2, and 3. And like I said, you can play it with the power emulation, especially Boktai 3 since I never got an official localization, but it's a fan translation. This is your warning buffer. Alright, let's get into the video proper. Lunar Knights was released 2006 Japan, but 2007 for the rest of the world. And so to make note immediately, the game's called Lunar Knights because Konami wanted to distance its entry from the previous Boktai games due to their low sales. So there are several changes, including the fact that I recently found out they actually have different key art of the characters for the US and Europe specifically that just looks so drastically different. And the idea this artist had with freaking Lucian's sword looks pretty cool, but the game never itself uses that kind of idea of the sword opening. I just wanted to make that note because I didn't even know this different rendition of the characters even existed. But like I said, they changed things up to distance of Boktai, with the Japanese name being Bokura no Taiyō, Django, and Sabata, or Boktai DS for short. And yes, the name has Django and Sabata, because those were the main characters' names in this entry in the Japanese version, but here they're renamed to Lucian and Aaron instead. Alright, let's get that buff right away. Now to the story proper. The premise is that vampires rule the world, and I do mean vampires because they are different from the immortals in the previous games. The vampires are equipped with casket armors that protect them from the sun's rays, but they also have the paraSOL system, which allows them to not only manipulate the weather, but it prevents intense sunlight from coming through. So even any sunlight that did come through, it still wouldn't affect the vampires. There's where our heroes come to play. Lucian, who's after the vampire Dumas, who's not only the main leader of the vampires, but also did something to Lucian in the past, which is why he wants revenge. Then, you also have Aaron. Aaron is a new Solar Knight who hasn't even had the ability to activate his solar gun yet, but wants to journey with Lucian, not only to pretty much save the world from vampires, but also to pretty much prove himself as a new Solar Knight to everyone. There are also NPCs you can talk to throughout the locations, but from what I've seen, they don't really have much to say. Even the info broker doesn't really tell you info. It seems like she more or less just has the information for stuff you already obtained when I take new information, which is disappointing in that sense. But with the fact that when it comes to one of the later dungeons, there are a bunch of NPCs you can talk to that do not only enhance the narrative going on, but also add a lot more to the locale which is taking place, so I wish the game had more of that, but it doesn't. So I also really like is also the dynamic between Lucian and Aaron. In this case, how despite Lucian pretty much not going out of his way to help people, just focusing on his mission of revenge, you do also have Aaron, who does also believe that, hey, he still will work with Lucian because he wants to help other people. So there is, even if they're not directly cooperating with each other, still it's a cooperation. And what I also really like is that later on, characters just start ignoring Lucian's lone wolf attitude and basically just go like, yeah, whatever. Hey Aaron, make sure Lucian's safe. Don't worry, I'll take care of that. So I do like that aspect where eventually they just start ignoring his lone wolf. I'm only care for my mission. I don't care about other people. Kind of whole entire shtick. A very interesting detail that, of course, originally played as a kid I didn't know about is that with now the knowledge of having played Boktai 3 Sabata's Counterattack, I now find it very interesting that Lunar Knights actually takes place in the ruined future that Trinity talked about. The characters directly mention stuff that was happening in Boktai 3 and the claims of the prophecy of a ruined future, and this basically is the ruined future that Trinity originally came from, which is such a crazy idea for a setting, which is completely lost on Western fans since Boktai 3 never officially released. Such a cool detail to pretty much include when it comes to this whole entire narrative. The whole entire idea that, hey, Boktai 3 is about trying to prevent a ruined future. Here, you don't get to experience that ruined future firsthand. Even down to the fact that the weapons that Sabata gets are named after the final bosses of Boktai 1, 2, and 3, which is such a even cool detail, or the fact that the locales in which you're able to obtain them are the remnants of locales from Boktai 1 and 2. That is freaking awesome. Something I will say right now is that with this being a DS and having anime cutscenes, which do look nice, but it also means there's a lot more voice acting work required here as opposed to the more one-sentence lines from previous entries, and the voice acting in this game is not good. It sounds very goofy in places.
I'd expect no less from a guild gunslinger. But I'm afraid playtime is over. Huh? Huh? Who are you?
You came for us.
Or the fact that even Lucian, who can sound fine in some places, will then sound completely wrong in others. So, this isn't a great dub, but hey, it entertains me, so I count that as a win. Now for the gameplay, with Lucian being a melee person who can use a sword, and later, through you can able to find them, you're able to get also a lance and a scythe. Then you have Aaron, who's your solar knight, so his main things are these solar weapons, which can take the form of one-handed gun, 2 guns, a freaking flamethrower, and a goddamn rocket launcher, which, I will say this, Aaron's weapons sound cooler than the actual execution because I just found Aaron not as fun to play as. Due to the fact that even the fact that you can upgrade weapons, his weapons always just felt way weaker than Lucian, surprisingly. Granted, Aaron exclusively has the ability to use Toasty, so he can use the power of the sun, which, when it comes to damage output on stuff like vampires, does on par with Lucian, even though I have Lucian way more upgraded, so there is some great use for him, and there are also some switches that require a long-range weapon. Lucian, however, I just mostly used him because I found his melee weapons way more reliable, and the fact that he's able to put the enemies into hit stun, which is also way more reliable than Aaron, who feels like I'm shooting enemies that just keeps walking towards me constantly and just feels more awkward. Like, it doesn't feel as good as Django in Boktai's 1, 2, and 3, where the solar gun will also just stun the enemies and halt their progress. So I just found Lucian better to play as overall. Now, I mentioned upgrades, and yes, you can upgrade the weapons, but it's through finding parts, and this is what irks me. It's the fact that you need to find a bunch of parts to upgrade the weapons, which isn't an issue. It's the fact that you can also buy the parts later on once you get them for the first time, which is super handy, although it gets very expensive later on. It's the fact that you need to upgrade the weapons so much in this game to keep up with the enemy levels that keep going on. And you need to upgrade so freaking much. It's also the fact that weapons can gain new abilities after a certain amount of upgrades, but it takes so many upgrades before you obtain those abilities. And it just ends up feeling more like a slog, and you're upgrading each weapon individually. Meaning you get a new weapon, that weapon starting out at basically its base level, and I gotta increase it to master the others, which basically made me just stick with Lucian's sword, and basically the freaking Night Frame for Aaron, because going out of my way to upgrade all the other weapons felt like way too much. But I will say is that level ups in this game, characters you're not using do get EXP and level up, which is nice, so they don't get as much experience as the other one from what I've seen, but it's a nice little detail, and you can use the status points in order to buff them. But when it comes to buffing them, I'm just saying this, I neglected certain stuff for each character. Like Lucian didn't upgrade its spirit much because I don't really use magic much with him, and for Aaron, I try to focus more on his freaking offensive abilities and energy. each left him more of a glass cannon because his health was so small. Another annoying thing about junk parts is the fact that they take a spot in your inventory. Like, you'll find them, they need to open the inventory in order to reveal what the item is. At that point, why not just have the junk part automatically turn into the junk item it is, rather than having to open it in the inventory? That just pretty much takes a slot of your inventory for no freaking reason, and it gets super repetitive, having to open the inventory, or go to the thing, look at it, see what it is, and then back out. This would have been a lot better if you just got the thing immediately the moment you walked on top of it. It's just a very weird thing to include. Another change to gameplay is they removed some of the light stealth elements from previous games. So no more sliding against walls, although you can blow into DS's microphone in order to attract enemies, which basically replaces your ability to knock on walls from previous games. But I didn't know that playing this game, so I wish I knew that. So there is that haunter aspect when it comes to trying to get enemy attention. There's also the paraSOL system, where after defeating vampires, you gain the ability to basically alter the weather depending on what terrestrial you got. The terrestrials essentially being living spirits of the elements, which are the usual elements from previous Boktai games, stuff like, ice, fire, wind, earth, so you unlock those change the weather. My issue is, changing the weather to unlock new pathways in the dungeons is super cool idea. The problem is, you have to back out of the dungeon completely in order to change the weather. And when you do change the weather, it only really affects one part of the area to allow progress to an optional goodie. And the optional goodie may not even be good to begin with, so it could just been a waste of time, and you gotta back out, change the weather again to a different climate in order to get a different optional goodie in the same dungeon, rinse and repeat. It just becomes freaking annoying, and rather than actually being really cool. Some enemies do have different variants on the weather, but it's just like, the freaking ghoul-like enemies are now ice instead of fire, or these little blobs are now fire instead of ice because of the climate, which is pretty bleh. The thing that does change dramatically, which is cool, is that it changes the weather, which includes your ability to draw energy. Because on the DS now, there's no solar sensor, unless you slot in Boktai 1, 2, and 3 in the GBA slot, but so that's by the point. There's no solar sensor, so it's in-game how the weather is handled, and there's a day and night cycle, so that way Lucian can recover energy through darkness, while Aaron recovers energy through sunlight. So there is a whole entire cool aspect where the climate will affect your ability to regain energy and how strong the intensity of it is, because some climates may show the sun, but the sun won't be intense enough for fast recovery. That is a cool way of handling the energy system in this game while in a solar sensor, which also highlights how a Boktai game could be made because you don't need a solar sensor to make Boktai, but people associate the franchise with it, so I know some people will ignore that part. As for the dungeons themselves, they are at their weakest here. There's no puzzles in this game. Okay, that's not entirely true. There are some very light puzzles, but they are rarely used in this game. This game is mostly combat. I mean, like 90% combat, maybe 95% combat, which the combat is enjoyable and does feel better than previous games, especially since both characters have built up a shield, and they can perfectly time the shield in order to repel enemy attacks, which is super cool. But it's just the fact that you're just basically walking through the dungeons and not really doing much with them. All the stuff that would have been puzzles in the previous games are just simple, hit this switch, good, go to the next area. Or, here's this freaking box, immediately break it because you can't push boxes, done. Which does mean no slide puzzles / box puzzles, which makes me happy. But it also means there's just nothing else going on in dungeons aside from the optional side areas that require you to change the climate. I would have preferred it if each area essentially had like an intense climate and the paraSOL ability allowed you to pretty much regain control and then reduce it to a less degree, but enough where you can still do the side areas. Because otherwise, each area is basically dictated by the climate, and since the player controls that, there's not really much going on. Like, it's weird how each Tyrannial basically is governing an area, but like, the areas aren't really affected by the element, only the boss has advantage of the element. So it feels weird how the game has a bigger opportunity to use the freaking climate system, but doesn't at all. Instead, just uses it for optional goodies, or to change the weather in order to be in your favor, or for, like I said, just the side goodies. Dawn are the pile driver segments, especially since the sunlight isn't even strong enough to purify the vampires, so we need a new method. In this case, Lucian summons the Laplace ship, or Laplace, as English voice acting says.
Laplace, come forth.
And operates it into a space shooter section, with the Tyrannials you obtain changing how the Laplace ship functions. Using this to incorporate touchscreen features is freaking cool, and definitely way better than the way the game normally does it, which is using the touchscreen to operate the world map and just feels more convenient than anything else. So these sections are great and do complement the game. I just wish that there were like, I'm not sure they fully are, because I just wish there were more like side things for this, because it's that Tyrannials pretty much change how the thing operates, and as one Tyrannial who basically you don't really get an opportunity to properly use them, since they're the second to last one, and that means the next time you use the freaking Laplace ship, it'll be in the final battle, which means that one Tyrannial doesn't really get a chance to shine with its ability. So I wish that was incorporated rather than only using them at the end of dungeons. It's kind of like how Boktai 3, you had side activities for the Coffin bike, so I wish it could have been done here with the Laplace ship, because otherwise, it's just super cool. I think it is a very good benefit and a cool way of incorporating touchscreen controls to this game. Now to mention content that was removed in localization, that being the crossover content with Mega Man Star Force. Only in the Japanese version of Lunar Knights will there be an optional quest in which Lucian and Aaron must help Geostellar for the Mega Man Star Force series, and doing this not only has a freaking unique boss fight for doing it with Oxfire from Star Force, but it also gives you access to Omega Sis as a Tyrannial, which is a freaking cool thing to add to this game, and I wish it was included in localization, but they didn't, with the reasoning I've seen being the fact that the English releases of each game came out too far apart from each other, so I decided to remove this crossover on both ends. To which I say, I don't care the games came out too far apart from each other, put the damn crossover in, how dare you? Especially when you continue the crossover content in Battle Networks 4, 5, and 6. Although I'm pretty sure 6 got its Boktai content cut as well. So I just wish that pretty much they kept that crossover in, because it's just a cool thing to include and highlights why Boktai and Mega Man have some of the coolest crossovers in video game history. Overall, I do like Lunar Knights and think if this had to be a last entry, that's a good way to go out. I just wish that, one, the original differences didn't happen, especially since, as me as a kid, it completely failed, because you think I'm not going to recognize Boktai? No, I walked to a store, saw that cover, and went, oh, that's Boktai, and I bought it. So, how dare you? But it also means we lost the Mega Man Star Force crossover, which also sucks. But as for the main game itself, it's good, but it just feels several steps back. Like, the dungeons lacking puzzles is just makes them feel more bland. The climate system could have been way more than it is, because instead it's just used for, oh, his area was a glider. Huh, do I use the climate setting that makes a lot of wind? Which would have been better if the climate feature affected the level more, like, oh, now there's more ice and snow on the level, which can affect your movement. Oh, now there's more fire hazards. Like, it feels like they're basically taking aspects that Boktai 1 did, which is being able to affect the environment a bit with the elemental lenses, and then just completely omitting that part for the sake of the most basic thing that requires back end of a dungeon, which is the climate. Even the elemental blocks from previous games are here, but instead they're just, oh, use the opposite element to break them, and that's it. That's all they do with them. It's just so disappointing. Combat is the best it is here, and it's super fun. I was about to mention the fact that Both characters also have the ability to use trans, and you can use it very early on, but it's not as powerful as Boktai 3, where there you can completely crush bosses immediately. Here it takes more effort to get that powerful, and there are some bosses where using the main trans isn't a good idea, but you can use trans with the other terrestrials and do a little mini game for damage. So there is that benefit where, hey, maybe you need a different terrestrial for a situation, and those situations will come up, so that's super cool. But that's it for the gameplay. Story-wise, as I said, I like it, and the fact that it takes place in basically the ruined future we didn't get to see in Boktai 3 is a super cool way of handling it, even if that whole entire concept would be lost on Western fans like me, who didn't know that playing the game first time as a kid. So, like I said, overall, it's a good game, but feels backwards. The spaceship battles are a good thing to have, but they don't exactly make up for the dungeons themselves being more bland. The boss fights are way more interesting, except for one part where you're fighting the same boss multiple times, but different elements. Why are we still doing this? So, overall, it is a good game, and that's been the last one. It is a pretty cool place to end things off of. So, that's it for the Boktai series with Lunar Knights. That's all I gotta say. Good day.